listening to Johnny Gill, New Jack Swing, and I was also listening to Aaron Hall, and I need to. So I was thinking about value, and value is the ability to create new goods and services, and also new goods and services themselves. So, for instance, right, like uh, say you're a fisher, right, and then you want to go fishing, right, and you want to be good at fishing. Then say maybe you try in like an aquarium or in empty aquarium to practice. So then practice doesn't get fish, but it makes you better at fishing. Or then say you're a fighter and your kind of value is like, beating people up. But then, the days that you don't beat people up, you don't produce value, but you can train, and so then you have the more potential to produce value. And so it isn't just producing value, but it's also increasing the potential to produce value. So, for instance, a company might make wound sockets or whatever, and they might make like 100,000 in their first quarter, right? But then the cost of making all those is much more than the profit. Cost minus revenue minus cost equals profit of selling all of them off, so that is where lean manufacturing comes in, where you have these companies that and more I've heard it's like you'll have these firms where they're the brand, they're the design, they're all the kind of CAD parts to it, with the machinery and whatnot, and the orders going around for what to make, how to make it. But who makes it is often these separate firms. But that's a detail that's not relevant to the picture I'm trying to draw. So anyways, you'll have these firms, decentralized firms, with lean manufacturing as a different term. It refers to a practice that incentivizes employees to try to learn different roles. It goes against the sort of specialization of Ford, where a job is all these different components, because it looks at that and it says, okay, there's imperfections that happen due to like errors by workers or just by the process, just by whoever, by accident, by the material selected. And so it looks at that, and it started in Japan and South Korea, and says, okay, well, if we're going to make these 100,000 wound sockets, let's make sure most of them are actually working. So instead of having, so herein we get this sort of thing with skills. Instead of having an easily replaceable workforce, which is its own sort of profit, it's saying, the machines, the human capital to build this isn't that much, so it's hedging on risk and stuff. That's another aspect of it, creating value, giving more potential for value. Because, for instance, right, creating a spaceship to Uranus, right, might be much more profitable than creating a billion cars. But for one, a billion cars, you can throttle up and down on that amount. One spaceship to Uranus, you can't throttle up and down on that amount. So the risk per unit is much larger with that big spaceship to Uranus, and it's very pie in the sky. And so Sorry, I lost track of what I was saying. But anyways, there's a conflict between supply and demand because implicit in any understanding is that the better quality, the lesser there is going to be of workers, for one, skilled workers, which is why it's incentivized to have very unskilled labor, to have the processes that you're doing be relatively unskilled, relatively replaceable, which incentivizes an authoritarian structure where, you don't reason it yourself. Of course, this is all, there's a lot of like knobs, and I'd imagine any person managing a job will have different knobs in different places, like your seat this certain way, and if someone changes it, you're like, oh no. And different things can be reasonable, and also there's different ways different people are irrational too. But so that's where lean manufacturing comes in. But as I was saying, the lean part, to our manufacturing is more of not getting rid of defects, but trying to get the supply chain in a way such that we have this Amazon model, so that wherever they're stored and the logistics of getting the product to the customer and like making the product, the business cycle, it's all cool, and you don't have this mess up where you're like, you're wearing this fashion but it's gone out of fashion. So it's very trendy, very fad focused, very market focused, very venture capital focused. Harvey Molich, where stuff comes from. He doesn't quite talk about this, but he talks about design a lot, and design is an interesting thing with regards to taking the utilitarian thing and then scaling it up to the actual thing that we have, because people might say, oh, all these bells and whistles are unnecessary, but then they don't really understand why all the bells and whistles are there. But so lean manufacturing, or the supply chain, which has caused this inflation, or at least started to cause it, is this very volatile system that if it's going great, it's great, but if it goes wrong, it's hard to get back on track because there's a lot of confusion, I guess, with deals and stuff. I have no clue. They're talking about like all that stuff, which I guess if you take it like a pyramid and these people at the bottom, then people at the top, they can eat the loss with like their shipping containers. Like a lot of shipping containers are owned by that one big Hyundai or something. They have a shipping container company. But then the nitty gritty, when you get to the distributors and the local economy and the demand for the goods, it's not as resilient. And awareness in the first place, the sort of cultivation of a consumer base, is something that you have to get started over time. And if you wait, it can die down, and other things can insert themselves that replace it. So this is all to underline. I don't really know how the fuck shit works, but it's complicated, and Yeah.